I've been thinking recently about how we are natural storytellers, right? Like we as human beings, it is absolutely how we make sense of the world. And it works, right? It works for us. Like you give us some data and we have a hard time making sense of it or understanding of it, but if you put it in a story form, we all of a sudden we can grasp it, we can repeat it, we can use it even. Story is a big part of how we were able to evolve and grow as a species. It is powerful. Story is very, very powerful. It, however, creates this problem in communication, right? It creates this problem in relationship because a lot of times we are carrying stories about ourselves, or stories about other people, or stories about situations, and those stories really impact the way that we communicate in those moments, the way that we problem solve, the way that we actually identify with what's happening. So the examples I usually give around this is that there's usually some sort of conflict, some thing that you're trying to communicate or you're trying to negotiate, and you're carrying a story with you, either a story from your past or maybe even a story like from that experience with that particular place or that person. And that story is going to really infect or color how you think about or prepare for that interaction. A good example of this is oftentimes when I talk to people and they say, I'm not a good public speaker, or I'm a terrible presenter. And it's always interesting, like when I hear people say that, I think about what they might actually mean, right? What the facts actually are, versus the story that they have in their mind about who they are and how important it becomes to them to prove to me that that story is right? We will work very hard, we'll bring a lot of energy to validate a story we have about ourselves and about how the world works. If you can recognize that that story is there, and if you could just put it aside, just almost like visually, like say, like, I don't need that story right now. Like, I've had this story for a long time that I'm not very good at math, or I'm not very good at sports, or I'm not very good at public speaking, or whatever the story is. It doesn't mean that you're all put it aside and now look at that, I'm really good at these things. It just means that it gives you a chance to revisit this moment anew. Sometimes you hear people talk about that like beginner's mind, but I sometimes have trouble with that, because when I'm a beginner at something, if I'm not aware of the story that I should know how to do this, or I should be able to understand this, or it's easier for other people than it is for me, if I'm not aware that that story is running in the background, I'll get super frustrated with myself. I'll bring a lot more energy to some sort of conversation. I'll feel myself tense up when there's nothing at stake, really, right? So if I can understand that story, if I can put it aside on the shelf, right? I can always pick it up later. It's still going to be there. And I just get clear about what is happening right in front of me, what is going on right now. And if I can do that, I have this chance of maybe writing a new story, of maybe seeing this moment anew, seeing myself in a different light, right? And if we do that, if we do that often enough, we can start to hear other people's stories and offer them an invitation to see themselves differently. Offer them an invitation to maybe change their perspective on what's possible. Because in the end, with communication and with the way that we interact with ourselves in the world, the way that we make sense of ourselves in the world, that while story is very helpful, if we can recognize it and become aware of it, and maybe even put it aside for certain interactions, we might be able to discover new stories and create new opportunities and redefine ourselves in ways that we hadn't thought possible. I'm Seth Rigoletti. I'm a leadership coach. You can find out more about me at sethrigoletti.com. Thanks for your time.